Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we talk about trends and how to use them to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We're Spark Partners. We're here every week to discuss all things trends, all things growth. And we like to relate things to the average consumer. We like to talk about some of our experiences. And that really is a good lens for us to showcase these trends we talk about, because we're out there just like you, buying things and selling things and being part of that market that we call the economy. And a good experience, as I mentioned earlier in our pre-call here, Adam, is with respect to my experience at two malls. The first mall was in Singapore. I was there about 6 months ago, and it was 7-8 stories tall. Every store was bustling. There was tons of people there running around. And it was an event to really appreciate. And then I come here yesterday, went to the mall with my son, and it was desolate. Nobody was there. A good 20% of the stores were closed. And of course, the reason why is, of course, Singapore doesn't have Amazon. And of course we do. So let's use that as a backdrop to discuss some of the things happening with retail.
Sure. So it was about, I want to say 10, 12 years ago that I started writing about retail when I was writing for Forbes. And it didn't take me very long to realize that the entire United States, we were overstored by about 50%. And the way you get to that number is you take the population and then you take the square footage of retail space. And you say, how many square footage of retail space is there? How much per person in the population, right? And the bigger that number, then that tells you that's more retail. So you want to make a comparison, and you say, well, how does the U.S. compare with places like England, France, Germany, the European countries? How does it compare with places like Japan, Tokyo, Japan, or maybe Hong Kong, or as you said, Singapore, Brisbane, or you could go to Sydney, Australia. All right, so that was the baseline. The data was readily available. Pull up, and you find out that we had about twice as much square footage of retail space as every other country in the world. And then if you ask people about it, they would sort of say, well, that's because we're such a bigger country with so much more land, and the land's less expensive, so our grocery stores are bigger, wider aisles, that kind of thing. And I did a little bit of research on that and I realized that, no, that's not right either. Yes, we do have bigger stores. Yes, our aisles tend to be a little wider, and that maybe could add 10% to the total number, but it wouldn't double the amount of square footage of that. So we just had an awful lot of retail space, retail stores, number of retailers. We just have a lot of it for the number of people who are in the country. And of course, the population wasn't growing all that fast, right? In fact, we've talked about the demographics of the population problems we have in the United States already. So what I started saying was some pretty big implications, because what we're going to see is we're going to start seeing a bunch of a decline in traditional retail, because there's just too much of it in the year 2012, 2013. There's too much of it. And so we should expect it to decline. Well, last week, Family Dollar Tree, that's the name of the company, Family Dollar Tree. They were in stores under those two brand names. They announced that they were going to declare bankruptcy and close 700 to 1,000 stores. Now, if you wound the clock back, Manny, to when you and I were a bit younger, and say maybe when you were in college, and Sears or Montgomery Ward's or somebody like that had come out and said, we're going to close 1,000 stores, it would have been the front page news, not the
easily.
Front page of the business news. It would have been front page news that they were going to close these stores. And yet, I would bet of our listeners, maybe half of them didn't even hear it, or perhaps it might have passed by them and they didn't even see it, right? It was like there, somebody said it on the news, it was like, didn't even ring a bell. Well, why not? It's because we've gotten so used to store closings, right? We've reached this point where it doesn't really register as news anymore. I mean, for example, I went and pulled some data. According to CNN, which pulled a bunch of numbers together, so I pulled it off their website, retailers closed 4,600 stores in 2023 alone. 4,600 stores. I mean, it's just a massive number. And if you start thinking about it, Rite Aid closed 431 stores last year. Rite Aid, the drugstore. But get this, CVS closed 300 stores, and Walgreens closed another 170, I think it was. So the net of all three of them was 800 drugstores closed last year. Right. 800. Of course, you might remember a year ago approximately, we talked about Bed Bath & Beyond. They filed bankruptcy. Their inventory was taken over by overstock.com. That led to the closure of 863 stores, Bed Bath & Beyond stores. David's Bridal, which used to be pretty popular, who would think you would? I don't think people would have considered a decade ago buying a wedding dress online, but the market has shifted dramatically. Yes, they closed 100 stores. I can remember when Party City was everywhere. They filed for bankruptcy. These are companies filed bankruptcy. Z Gallery, Rite Aid, Bed Bath & Beyond, David's Bridal, Party City, L'Occitane. That was my girlfriend uses their products. It has ever since I've known her, and I started, a few years ago learning about this sort of high-end products that they had. They went bankrupt in 21. Yeah.
So these are all they reorganized, right? They some of them. I mean, they're still around to some degree, right? Some of the ones you mentioned.
Yes, there are some stores that I keep the name. But I guess what I was trying to tell people is, if you don't consider bankruptcy failure, you have a very, very low bar. I mean, let's get serious. Bankruptcies are caused that you have not enough cash to pay your debts. So your debts could be because you took out a bond or you issued a bond. I'm sorry. Your debts could be money you owe your suppliers. You could just get so far behind in terms of paying for the inventory that you can't catch up, and your suppliers could push you into bankruptcy. But the net of it is that the money coming in the front door isn't big enough to cover your costs, which could include financing. Now, again, I will agree that part of this was private equity firms got involved with some of these retailers, especially a decade ago. They looked around and said, there's all this real estate. And so we could take the retailer, we'll acquire it, we'll go to the banks and say, look, this is all this real estate. Real estate never goes down in value, and they would load a lot of debt on top of it, and you get Toys R Us, right? You get a company that's doing barely mediocre, and then you pile a bunch of debt on it, because you say, well, the real estate alone is worth a lot of money, and the net of it is they quickly can't pay their bills, and Toys R Us goes out of business. So see how easy it is for us to think about the Sears isn't here anymore, right? Yeah. Toys R Us isn't here anymore. It's so easy now to think about these retailers that went out of business. And I think that one of the lessons that I'm trying to drive home here is that this was predictable. And I think, you and I spend our life looking at trends and doing scenario planning. And the point of it, you could predict this. It wasn't hard to predict. If you looked at the demographics, you looked at the amount of space that was used for shopping in other countries, and you start saying, wow, there's just too much space. I, by the way, have been to Hong Kong. I've been to Singapore, and you're right. There, the malls are very, very crowded. And it's not just because there's no Amazon. It's because actually, if you look around, they don't have as many retail stores.
They don't.
So that brings people in. And then people in the surrounding countries, people from the Philippines, mainland China, places like that, they don't have enough stores, believe it or not. They still have a form of retail that's not quite as sophisticated as what we're used to, a lot more small stores. And so they'll fly somewhere to have access to a better quality store with a better quality merchandise to it. So the fact that we just have so much made it very easy to predict that we're going to lose it. So, and I just want to kind of blow this out a little bit more. And that I took a look. Walmart closed 24 stores in 2023. They've already closed 10 in 2024. Best Buy has already closed 15 in 2024. Macy's has announced it will close 150. Of course, Macy's declared bankruptcy as well, right? They're Macy's Bloomberg something or other. They've been trying to buy up department stores as if we cared, right, about department stores anymore. Walgreens, on top of what I've already discussed, they've announced they're closing another 150 stores in 2024. Foot Locker started a program in 2023. They said they will close 545 stores by 2026, 545. If they've announced that, they'll probably close 800 because when snowballs roll, they roll downhill, and the number will get bigger. And then CVS has closed 900 stores altogether since 2022. So,
I think part of that, of course, can be attributed to the over retailification, if you will, of the U.S., but also the fact that they don't necessarily follow trends. And, we went to this Dick's Sporting Good to buy a hoodie that my son wanted, and they didn't have his size. Customer service was terrible, and no one, it was just terrible experience. And so it's like he just looked online and said, "Dad, we'll just get it online." Yeah, it was just as simple as that. Simple as that.
And Dick's is one of the best of all of them. They've actually been growing a few stores, and they bought Walmart owned a store chain called Moose Jaw, which I didn't even know. I don't know where these stores are, but anyway, They got bought by Dick's Sporting Goods in 2023. So I'm not necessarily counting the Walmart store decline. That's a whole different thing. Where those stores ended up with Dick's, and I don't know how many of Dick's are keeping open and what they're doing with them. But I do know that Dick's is one of the better performing retailers out there. And so, again, why do I want to talk about this? One, people who are doing business, you should be using scenario planning, projecting what's likely to happen in your market. Is it likely to get bigger on its own? Are you in the river with your canoe, and so just if you can keep up with the current, you'll do fine? Or have you flattened out into a lake or a swamp, and the water's not moving, and you're going to have to put a lot of energy into growth on your own? You need to know that in advance. You need to know that, okay, it's going to get a lot harder to compete. If you're in retail, it's a lot harder to compete. If you're in real estate, be realizing, okay, 10 years ago, I don't know that I want to be out there building more strip centers. I mean, you probably have where you are. It doesn't seem to matter where I go. I get on an airplane, I go to Florida, I go to Michigan, I go to California, wherever I go. It is easy to drive by strip centers and see it's somewhere between half and all the stores are empty. I recently went on a holiday to a town called St. Helena, California, which is north of San Francisco, sits in the middle of the wine country. It's this sort of picturesque wine country town, right? People go there for holidays, go taste wines, that sort of thing. The downtown area is like 3 blocks long. It's all, it's all geared towards people with some money. They've got to come here and buy some one-off stuff, right? It's the kind of place that you would say, they fill the sidewalks every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even in the rain. And when the weather's nice, you can't even find a place to park in town. Cheapest house, 900 square foot house is $2 million.
Yeah.
We're there. About a third of the stores on the main street of town were closed.
Really?
Empty storefronts.
That's crazy.
Well, so this is like one of the best places you could hope to be, and still it's a struggle and to keep yourself competitive.
It's a lot of it's a confluence. We talk about the river analogy or the lake or whatnot, and there's a lot of things happening here. There's some rapids. There's the mouth of the river, and some of the experiences that I've had recently. I actually had a conversation with one of my coaching clients this morning about she wants to move into a bigger retail space and maybe even buy. And she says, I'm in my lease until next summer. And I said, well, it's going to be probably a good time to buy. And in the kind of business she has, having a space is good. And it's going to be an interesting time a year from now when her lease is up. She should be able to get something pretty good size for not a lot of money.
And so let's take what that means. We had one of our earliest podcasts, we had a fellow that was making his own beer, selling beer. Remember that?
Yep.
And Tucson. And one of the questions he was posing was whether or not he should buy a building. And we said at the time, given the trends, no. Go for a 1-year lease, go for renewable 1-year leases, because you will get a larger space for less money in a few years. Well, now time's passed, it's for sure he can get a bigger space for less money. That's why we do this sort of scenario planning, is so that you can make a smart decision and say, well, it looks like I could buy this building, but is now the right time, or should I wait? Maybe I could get it for a lower price in 3 years. Right now, that's the way the trends are heading. There's a lot of retail space coming available. A lot of times on a loan, so somebody builds retail space, and the loan will state, literally, will state in the loan that they have to rent that space at a certain price per square foot. Same thing happens with commercial real estate. They'll say, okay, here's your loan. And what they don't want to do is have somebody get upside down on the loan because they rented the space out too cheaply. So they'll say the minimum cost that you can rent this for. That's why you'll hear people say, we'll give you 2 months free. And then here's the lease. It's because they can't lower the price. And so there's a 400 based on the loan covenants. So then they'll say, well, we'll give you a couple months free. Well, that's going to keep it extended. But eventually what happens is the thing's not viable. The owner has to walk away, loses his equity. The bank ends up with the property again, and then the bank's got to turn it around. Now the price drops. So you get a big price decline in that building based upon the fact that it's going to be refinanced, new ownership, all that kind of stuff's going to happen. So right now, we're looking at retail. We've been talking for 3 years, so since the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, work from home was coming. The pandemic drove work from home. And even though with a lot of people are trying to get everybody back in the office, reality is that the number of workers in the country is not going up. Went to the demographics. People are working more from home. The commercial space just isn't going to be necessary. So again, I would say if you have a need for an office, for commercial office space, you want to try to keep it smaller because you probably don't have many people in the office. And second, you want to be sure that you're doing short-term leases because it's probably going to get cheaper and cheaper, and especially if you can be flexible and change location, so you can take advantage of that. Oh, hey, sign a year lease, I'll give you 2 months for rent. That's the kind of thing you want to be in a position to take advantage of. So that's why we follow these trends, because it can really help you to make better decisions going forward. And now it starts to get back to your planners, right? At some point, this stuff has to go into your planning commission, and they should sit down and say, look, if whatever's happening in our town, we either need more of this or more of that based upon where the future is. And do we need more retail space, for example? They should be putting that into their plans. But if the city planners will do it, then it's up to the developers to sit down and say, you know what, there's too much retail space. We need more of something else. If we can get more of that land, we need it converted. And they can go to the planners and say, look, based upon our forecasts, then this is what we should do. And then that's where we as customers come in. We should be telling people what we need, right? And we should be able to say, if I'm in a restaurant, look, in a year and a half, this is what I'll need. Then we give you another example. Retail has changed dramatically, and you're probably familiar. Best Buy was the kind of place you thought of to just go in and buy your electronics. But then they got smart and started saying, you know what, we'll have store in store, meaning we'll take a certain chunk of square footage and we'll let Apple have that square footage at a certain price, and Apple's responsible for the products in that store, in that section. And then, of course, people just buy it at the front door. So they reconfigured their minds. What is our purpose? They realized it was becoming storefronting, meaning, hey, I'm going to go to the store to look at this, but then I'd go online to buy it. And they said, how do we bring those two together? Well, okay, let's get the people making the televisions and the other products to realize they can be in our store and then sell it in our store for the same price you're selling it for online. That way people can get the grab and go. Maybe it's a little bit more because of the convenience, which is cool, but it keeps people from straightforward storefronting, looking at that in the store, walking out and trying to buy it for 10 or 15% less, right? So you got to think that through. Now, let me give you another example. I had a client out of Philadelphia that made windows and doors. It wasn't a huge business, but it was about a $50-60 million business. And the fellow who had it had put some effort into design. His manufacturing techniques, the quality of his product were really good. And he could sell his windows and doors in other markets. And he kept trying to look for a way to expand, and he would struggle, and he would almost he'd failed every time before he got me. And what he would do is he would go to a distributor, and he would say, okay, look, why don't I've got the doors, I'll manufacture. I wish you would go off and call on the builders in your marketplace and talk to them about buying windows and doors from you. They'll be mine. We'll be spotted. I'll get you all the brochures. We'll do all the quoting for you, et cetera. And go out and sell my doors. Well, what happened was the distributors didn't have that much motivation, right? They're just like showing up at the builder saying, how many windows do you need? And then they'd say, who can go cheap, right? They try to get the best price on them. Because really what the distributor did was fulfillment. He said, once there was demand, I'm ready to fulfill the demand. I'm ready to manage the orders. That's what I do. But distributors don't really sell. Amazon's like that. It doesn't really sell, right? Right. But what I told him was, I said, we had examples now of people who would go into a new market and they would open up 6 storefronts. And you could go into the storefront and they say, here's my windows, right? And here's my doors. And show them to people. They could get a sense of, why should you buy them? There's somebody knowledgeable there that could talk to regulations and energy efficiency and all these things. And then they would say, yeah, well, you can buy the door from us or you can go buy it online. And then the distributor would get the order and it would be fulfilled, right? And then we also learned that people do shop on Amazon. So we put up a storefront on Amazon. And I said, right off, we probably won't sell many doors and windows on Amazon. But if people find us on Amazon and then we refer them to our storefront, they go there. Now, he would never have been able to do storefronts except for this collapse of retail. The collapse of retail meant there was these empty spaces that were sitting, and he could walk in, and all he needed was a concrete floor. And he didn't care about the floor ceiling. He doesn't have to have a wonderful door. He sells windows and doors. And so he would just walk in with his inventory, set it up, have a knowledgeable person hired, put him through some training in Philadelphia, and they would open the door 7 days a week, open it up at like 10:30, 11 o'clock, keep it open until 6:37 in the evening, and they'd be there to answer. So again, what do we say? The trend, meaning there's retail space available, could you take advantage of it? Here was a fellow who thought that the way to sell windows and doors was to get in your car, go find the builders, and knock on them and say, look, I'd like to sell your product. And what we discovered was that we could do better with these storefronts because people would walk in, see it, they would go to the builders and request it. If we did want to push it through a distributor, we would just refer them to the storefront to go take a look at it. That was an easy way for them to get a handle on it. So this is why understanding that retail is dying and all this space coming available becomes valuable for people that haven't thought about before. Maybe you've never thought of having a retail store, but you could have a storefront now because the price is right.
And we have this great tool. We have this Trend Report 2030 that gives the top 66 trends that are in play till the end of the century, or sorry, the end of the decade. And really, that is a great tool. If you're any sort of business, you take that list of trends and you see how your business is aligned with those trends. The more trends you have, the more of a chance for success. And we talked about this many times before. Somebody like Elon Musk has layered trend on trend on trend to become hyper successful. And that's what everybody else is doing. All the big boys, the Amazons of the world, the Apples, they're doing exactly the playbook is there. Follow the trends, make sure you're satisfying your customers in new and impressionable ways, delight your customers. It's not that hard if you really think about it, if you look at it from our perspective. But again, a lot of folks don't have this perspective, and that's what we're here every week to talk about.
Let me go back now. Let's take another view of this. Let's say you're in business, you really enjoy your business, and you see that it's going to be hyper competitive. The big thing is saying, well, I got to be different, right? I got to find out a way to serve needs that are not easily met, that are poorly met. And an example of this retail is IKEA. IKEA was founded in the 1950s. We just had one, they were just in Sweden. That was it. But it was in the 1960s that they expanded into Norway and Denmark. And then they started thinking in the 1980s about going to other places. They really spread it wide. They went to Canada, with Toronto, I think it was, and they went down to Australia. They went to put a store in Hong Kong, right? So if you go back, let's go back pre-pandemic. All these retailers got crushed in the pandemic, right? In 2020, IKEA had 445 stores around the world. In 21, they had 458. In 22, 460. In 466. In 23, it's 471. And according to the chart I pulled up today, we're starting 2024 at 498 stores. So IKEA has been expanding at the same time that these other retailers are doing poorly. You sit there and say, well, why? Well, and there's two big factors on it. One, where are people's needs poorly met for these daily household items, right? They're not trying to say, oh, I'm going to put, a store, in where I am. Instead, they're reaching out to these far, far-flung places. The number one country where they have stores is actually in, I'll pull it up here again, is in Germany, 55 stores. U.S. has 52. They have 4 in Thailand, 4 in Saudi Arabia, 4 in Malaysia, 3 in Singapore. Remember Singapore? What do you do if you live in Singapore where it's all skyscrapers and everything's super expensive? And, how do I get the daily needs that I have? I need a couch and stuff. You can go to IKEA. There's 3 stores in Singapore that you can go to, right? There's 3 in Kuwait. I'm trying to find some others that you find interesting. There's 8 in Belgium, right? There's 12 in Japan, 7 in Indonesia, 7 in Turkey, 3 in Puerto Rico, 4 in the Dominican Republic. So now they only have 52 in the United States, but I don't know a person that doesn't know IKEA. In fact, there's all these jokes all the time, right? About you buy a piece of furniture in IKEA for 30 minutes, and it takes you 30 days to figure out how to put it together, right? Yeah. it's having had the experience, the picture instructions are not always as easy as we like, and the tools don't fit quite as right, and pieces don't go together. But people buy. They buy
exactly, and that's one of the perfect examples of a storefront, right? One of the inventors of that concept. You go to the store, you walk around the top, and everything's set up so you get ideas. I don't know if the last time you went to IKEA, but it's usually couples and families that are in there that are looking at the sort of the series of dioramas, if you will, of the couches and the pictures and the lamps, and you write everything down, and then you go downstairs and pick it up, right? Yeah. You go down there and get it, and of course, it's an experience. I love going to IKEA, and I've gone to IKEA only for the food. I'm in the Phoenix area, and I love their meatballs, or I love their salmon. I go there, I get to sort of just hang out for a bit, have my coffee, and then leave. It's kind of ridiculous, but I enjoy it. It's an experience. And they're fulfilling what customers want.
That's exactly it. We always talk about this. Where are the poorly met or the unmet needs? And so the reason I'm rating off those countries is because you can say, people in Puerto Rico, they had a real need for somebody that could supply furniture and these products, clean environment, products reasonably safe, products to use, on and on. They needed that. It was a poorly met need in Puerto Rico, right? And then I'm asking our audience, when you look around, you say, hey, I meet a need. I do it well. Where is that need poorly met? Because it could be that you could do what you're doing in a different location where the needs are poorly met and you could be successful. And that's what IKEA teaches us. Be sure you know what you know. And so there's a sense of, okay, I want to have a focus. People say, I really like this. This is what I want to do. And my point is, okay, that's fine. Just don't expect it to be successful everywhere, because you've got to be where there's a poorly met need. And can you be unique in the way you meet those needs? So if you really focus on that value proposition, what's the value proposition? I want to give you affordable products for your everyday household needs. You start saying, okay, I know that. Where can I go, and where would that be? Where would that need be poorly met? And how could I be able to succeed? So even in a terrible market like retail in the United States, a retailer could be very, very successful if you follow this IKEA method of know your value proposition and then go after the poorly met need and fulfill that poorly met need well. The guy that I knew with the windows, when he would take his windows to a new market, it was usually, what he really excelled at was greenhouses. And he could take the same windows and he could put them together into greenhouses. And in a lot of northern climates, people really like to have a greenhouse because you can start gardening a couple or 3 months earlier. And often you can extend your garden a bit with a greenhouse. And so what he did is he said, here's my windows and doors, but you can assemble them into these greenhouses. And that was where the market was most poorly met. People didn't have a good way because not many people were building greenhouses, right? So you can always go find those poorly met needs if you're looking around and see what's happening. And then you say, where is the trend headed? So either A, if you see a trend, figure out how you can take advantage of that, low real estate costs. If you're in retail and you say, I need to go online if I'm going to be competitive, we've said that. Maybe I need a storefront methodology where people see the products in the storefront, but they can buy them online, right? That's another methodology to try to be competitive in a marketplace that's trending into a new direction. Or you start to say, I got a whole a value proposition that lets me do things and with the traditional value delivery system, but I'm pretty unique, and I can really meet poorly met needs well. So these stories aren't just stories of failures of people to tell a story of failure, but rather to say, how should it affect your decision making? Mm-hmm. And can you bring the data in and don't just look at it and let it pass you by? Don't let it be like, 1,000 stores are being closed. Why do I care? Why do I care if 1,000 Family Dollar stores are being closed? Instead, say, what's the implications of this? What does it mean? Is there something I could be doing to take advantage of this? Mm-hmm. If people, like you said, you like to get out of the house and you go to an IKEA for a coffee and whatever, some food, whatever. So they're giving you an environment. That's how Starbucks got started, remember? It wasn't just the coffee. It was the idea that you go meet some friends at Starbucks and have a good time. People do still like that. And we're hearing all the time that people are losing some of these social interactions, right? That they don't go to the office like they used to for social interactions. So retailing is what you do. How could you address that? Is there something you can do in your business to bring people together? Storefront your business, for example, is one way that you might become the center, a social mobile center, in which people could be attracted to you. And then you use the other tools. Like I said, we used an Amazon storefront. We didn't think people would buy windows, but it gave us awareness, and then they would direct them to the storefronts, and then that would grow the business. Now you start saying, could I use Instagram? Could I use TikTok? Could I use the social media tools at my hand to go off and take advantage of this low-cost real estate that's out there? So these trends are important. That should be affecting your decision-making on a weekly, monthly basis.
And they constantly shift, and a lot of it has to do with looking around at your business and what trends are there, and also having the courage to make that move. I know a lot of people that are almost paralyzed. They are business leaders, owners in their own right, and they have had some success, and the market's shifting or has completely shifted, and they're paralyzed. We see that a lot. We see companies that they're just trying to push the same old in the same way, and ultimately they're not getting to where they want to be, and they're blaming their salespeople. They're saying these salespeople can't sell. Well, the truth is the market shifted and nobody wants your product anymore. It's crazy, but it happens a lot.
Yep. So I hope our listeners can take advantage of some of this insight we've offered today. Retail is closing fast. It will continue to close a lot of stores for the next decade. And it's going to shift because what we do, we shop and then we deliver. And so we start, what happens at an Amazon is they deliver a product after you've decided to buy it, right? So now how can you take advantage of the online tools to get awareness? And then how can you take advantage of the physical world to get awareness, right? And then figure out who's going to be the delivery agent. Are people going to carry it out of the store, or are people going to buy it through a distributor, right? So the world changes, and you should be taking advantage of that every day in the business as you start growing it. As I drive down the streets and I look at gas stations, I always wonder, why doesn't every single gas station have an electric charger in it? I'm always just befuddled by that, because a normal electric charger in 10 minutes will give you enough charge to get maybe 20, 30 miles down the road to a fast charger, right? If that's what you're trying to get to. And so if somebody could pull in for 10 minutes and have coffee, have a soft drink at any gas station, right? And you've got them. They might stick around for 30 minutes if you've got a hot dog stand on the inside and all that other stuff that goes with the fast food that's in many of our gas stations these days. So I don't understand it. If I had a gas station, I'd have a couple of chargers, that's for sure.
Couple of chargers.
People are just looking at it and saying, hey, here's an opportunity for me to think ahead, think about what's the business going to look like and how do I try to migrate myself to that new position.
Very well said, Adam. Very well said. With that, we'll conclude today's podcast and look forward to conversing with you. If you have any thoughts on, if you want the Trendsetter or the Trend Report 2030, send me an email at manny@sparkpartners.com or adam@sparkpartners.com. And with that, we'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much, Manny.
Cheers.